Welcome back. You're listening to the Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price, presented by the Bulletproof Family Podcast. I'm Todd Halverson. I'm joined, as always, by Brian O'Leary and Matt Davis. Today, we are talking trades that we've done recently, and Matt's had a few. I've had a few. We're also talking kind of a rookie draft debrief is what I'm going to call it. So I've completed 12 of my 14 rookie drafts. I think Matt's up in the high teens. Brian, we won't reveal his number, but it's more than Matt and I combined so far. So I think we have a nice sense of what the market is looking like for rookie drafts. So we're going to be talking about some guys that maybe we're surprised that we keep getting, because that's happened to me several times. Where I'm like, wow, I just landed this player and I wasn't expecting to get any of them. Or maybe some guys that we've got FOMO on that we're kind of high on, but we're not high enough, obviously. So we're going to be running through all of that. We'll get to the trades at the end. Brian? Play that, Fat Joe.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Like Fat Joe says, yesterday's price is not today's price. So, Matt, who are some of the guys, or who is a guy that you are surprised that you continue to get, or maybe you've gotten a few shares of that you weren't expecting? Like, I know when I was coming in, Ricky Pearsall was a guy I had no interest in coming into rookie draft season, and here I found myself get him a couple times. So who are some guys like that for you that you kind of find yourself drafting?
So I've completed 14 out of 20 drafts so far, and of the 6 that I have left, actually 4 of those 6, I do have a lot of my first round picks left cumulatively, so I still have a lot of firsts to go. So I'll talk about 2 guys that don't really matter, and then one guy that kind of does. So the 2 guys that don't really matter, Braylon Allen and Tez Walker, are 2 prospects I didn't like, I don't care about, didn't really target in any drafts. And I have 3 shares each of Tez Walker and Braylon Allen, and all 6 shares combined were drafted between 406 and 412. So end of the 4th round. So just based on
dumpster dive players.
Yeah, well, just based on ADP, Braylon Allen is 311.
I didn't even realize that. That's pretty high. That seems a little way too high for him.
And I just get him at the end of the 4th round because, whatever. None of those guys matter. The one guy that I'm kind of surprised is falling to the mid to late second is Xavier Legette. He's a prospect that I didn't really care a ton about. Don't love the landing spot. And I don't know. I just find him a better price than guys like Corum and guys that are going around him. So I'm just kind of...
He's very similar to Pearsall.
He's a guy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. So go ahead.
Both late first rounders. So they're both going in the mid first or mid second of rookie drafts, but both being late first round picks in the NFL draft. Like mid second, that's a pretty good deal. I mean, their profiles are not very good, but people seem to think that they're pretty good from a film perspective. They're kind of in the same tier along with AD Mitchell. So in that grouping in the mid-second that you're seeing go 205 through 207 is Pearsall, Legette, Mitchell. I found myself get Pearsall a couple times. I think the guy that I've been pleasantly surprised to draft, and then Brian, I want to hear from you as well. The guy that I've been pleasantly surprised to draft is Jalen Polk. I feel like, and Matt, you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, I feel like Jalen Polk kind of bridges the gap between that tier of receivers with Pearsall, Legette, and AD Mitchell. And then Polk is kind of the bridge to that next grouping where you have an ADP. You've got kind of a little bit of a gross situation with Troy Franklin, Jalen Wright. I'm not real thrilled, Roman Wilson. I don't really have any interest in any of those guys. And so I like Jalen Polk, able to get him at the very end of the second as an early second rounder in the NFL draft, going to Drake May, really kind of a weird situation, I think, with that receiving group, with him, Javon Baker, and Demario Douglas. Pop Douglas, Kendrick Bourne. It could be anybody's receiving room. Maybe Polk can get the slot work, but that's a guy for me that I'm really interested in that late second. I think I've got him one time at the 303, which was nice. So Brian, who are some of the, I mean, you've got so many drafts, but who's a guy that you're kind of surprised that you've been getting more often than you would have expected?
So I thought, first of all, I've completed 46 drafts so far.
Just own it. There we go.
So that's why I always ask, if you're in one of my leagues, that's why I always ask, like, hey, give me an at, because like it's hard to keep track of that when all of those drafts are firing at once or pretty close to each other. So thank you for those that didn't put up too much of a bitch for that. One person that I know I liked and I thought more people liked, and then he had a pretty good landing spot he's dropping lower than expected. Adonai Mitchell for sure. Adonai. There we go.
Adonai, yeah.
I couldn't speak there for a second.
I just go with AD Mitchell. It's way easier.
Yeah, that's why everyone calls
I
me.
tried Adonai Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell. I tried all of those for a while. Now I'm just going AD Mitchell. Yeah. Way easier.
Yeah. Adonai. I just didn't know how to talk there for a minute, but he was one of my favorite players in this draft just because of I think it's because of the polarizing nature that I don't think there's going to be a medium level outcome with him. I think he's going to hit big or he's going to crash big. And to me, that's kind of a fun mid to late 2 is where he's been going. That's a fun gamble to take, I think. And then it probably a little biased that he's on the Colts too. But I think with the coaching staff, I think it's going to be a fun offense. I think they're going to be doing a lot of cool things. I think he has the potential to come right in and potentially be a contributor if he's not a moron. He's who I expected to get some of him, but he is my highest owned player in all of rookie drafts that I've done. I have 12 shares of him, so that's 26%.
What's the earliest that you've taken AD Mitchell?
I think it was 203, 202 to that's a range. That's
a reach. That's a bit of a reach for me, but I think starting at 205 is where I'd be comfortable. I prefer Pearsall to him, but
yeah.
After and now, I don't think you guys are as high on Penix as I am, but Penix for me, there's basically a tier from 202 to 204, and it's Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, and Michael Penix Jr. And then you have that next wide receiver grouping of Pearsall, Leggett, AD Mitchell. I think it's dealer's choice on who you prefer between those three. My preference is Pearsall. I think there's a lot of people that like Leggett, and then there's a lot of people that like Mitchell. I think it's very kind of mixed across the board. But as far as like their ADP, they are just clustered right together.
And speaking to Leggett, I'm surprised that he didn't get more like personality hype along with his draft capital. Like I just think he's like him and Keon Coleman are both just like hilarious interviews for different reasons, but hilarious interviews. They both got high draft capital. In theory, both have great opportunities, and I don't see either of them like really like skyrocketing up boards like I thought maybe they did. Like we talked before the NFL draft, like whoever lands with the Bills, that's going to be 109, 110 or 110, right? And then I see Keon Coleman every so often there, and I've seen him go as high as 108. But then I've seen him at the back of the second round too. Like it's a pretty wide range with him for sure.
I don't really see Coleman falling below 202 almost ever, and I think that's like a fair steam up, right? Because the guys that are going in front of him are 12th overall Bo Nix, Jonathan Brooks, who had better draft capital, and then Ladd, Brian Thomas, Worthy, first round, good landing spot. So I feel like the market steamed Coleman up as much as was reasonable. But yeah, outside of that, I'm kind of seeing the same thing with like Leggett and AD. Surprised that they're kind of falling where they are a little bit. I prefer
think my take on Coleman in his draft slot is that in your leagues that I don't want to, I'm just going to say it, are maybe less sharp, and sharp's not even the right word because we're all just kind of guessing here, but your leagues that are less, let's say that are less in the Twitter bubble.
Right.
I'm seeing him go in like the late first, he's kind of in that same tier with like Ladd McConkey and Brian Thomas Jr. because of his landing spot. The leagues where maybe there's more Twitter bubble influence, it's that 202, 203 spot. whether it's kind of behind Benson or Penix Jr. So anywhere in that 202 to 204. I haven't seen him go into the late second, but I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this podcast is we've got, you've got 48, we've got 26. So we've got 74 rookie drafts between us. That's a pretty good sample. So obviously looking at ADP is nice, but it doesn't really give you a good influence of what's happening on the range of outcomes for these players. So that's kind of the point of this podcast, is to kind of have a nice view of 74 different leagues and 74 different rookie drafts that are happening. And it's really kind of across. I mean, I've got 4 home leagues. So, I mean, you've got a nice, I think, array of views within kind of what our subset of leagues.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, it's easy to like fall into like you just stay in a bubble of people that all think the same way, draft the same way, whatever. And I think we branch out a lot of different directions. Like you're talking about home leagues.
I'm in safe leagues. Say you want to talk about a whole different world. Ben Sinnott, 311 in safe leagues. I got him there.
What? I don't even know what safe leagues is.
It's a whole different world on safe leagues. I will say this: it's a non-tight end premium league, but still, like the ADP. Throw this sleeper ADP out the window when you're on safe leagues. Drake May back to the 109. I had Brock Bowers at the 109. That's who it was. So now that is a non-tight end premium, but still. I mean, safe leagues is a whole nother world. So you want to get outside of the Twitter bubble? You want to get outside of the sleeper bubble? Go play on safe leagues. They're always looking for people to fill their leagues too. So
Matt, I think it's just a different platform. I'm pretty sure that's what Safe Leagues is.
It's on my fantasy league. Scott Fish runs it.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds familiar. Okay, so that's the one Scott Fish is always trying to fill spots for. So we each kind of mentioned one guy like in the middle of the second without even intentionally talking about who we were going to mention: A.D. Mitchell, Leggett, and Pearsall. Todd, I'll ask you this in a second. Brian, you first. Is there a guy outside the top 24? Like I said, Braylon Allen and Tez Walker. Is there a guy outside the top 24 going into your rookie drafts? You're like, I don't really care about this guy. I don't want him. And you're higher than you expected to be on him.
Yeah.
Is it a bunch of them because of how varied your picks are? Or
I have out of my 46, right? I mentioned Mitchell is my highest owned at 12 out of 46. I've made a lot of draft picks. I have a ton of guys like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 range out of 46.
Okay.
Leading that charge, I didn't expect Luke McCaffrey to be someone that I necessarily was like super heavily exposed to. I have 6 shares of him so far. Bucky Irving I liked but don't love. I have 7 of him just because I think he's been in non-Zoltan leagues. He's been dropping.
That's true. He takes him kind of high.
Jalen McMillan is my highest owned Washington receiver of the trio. Didn't expect that, but again, he's like going like fourth, late 3, going into the 4th. He went undrafted in one of my 10 teams. He didn't go drafted, so I'd like picked him up. So those are 3 for sure. Yeah,
that makes sense with McCaffrey and McMillan being the same kind of guys. Did you have 1 or 2, Todd?
Yeah, so in the 4th round, the guy that I've found myself I think I've gotten him. I'm looking at my ownership here. I think I've gotten him 3 or 4 times out of the 12. I didn't have a lot of 4th round picks, to be honest. But the ones I did, Eric All, I got him several times. So I really 4th round tight end with the Bengals.
From Iowa.
From Iowa. So, that's a hit right there. So, I think Eric All is one that I'm really chasing in the 4th round. The other one would be, I haven't gotten as much as I would like, but Spencer Rattler. I think last podcast or a couple podcasts ago, I said that he was in the 3rd round. I got a lot of flack for that. So he went in the 5th round of the NFL draft. Thank you for all the DMs to letting me know that I said the 3rd round.
Shout out Tony Reale.
Yeah, thanks. Shout out Tony Reale. Spencer Rattler would be one that at the very end of the third, early fourth that I like, because I think at some point that's the type of guy that he'll find his way into like a 3-game sample where he has a chance. And if he looks good, then all of a sudden he's worth an early second. If he looks great, then people are saying, oh, like you might be able to trade like Rattler and a second for a first or something like that. I mean, that's how quick these quarterbacks can just boom up. I mean, don't forget, Sam Howell was worth like a very late or a very early second last year. So I think that's a guy that if you can get him in the early fourth, late third, like that's a nice spot to get. I think if I'm talking about guys that I like, but I haven't gotten much of, Luke McCaffrey is one of them. So you mentioned him, Brian. Luke McCaffrey is a guy that I really liked coming in. I just didn't have a lot of picks that fell in the range to get him. For example, like one time I had a late third and I ended up taking Javon Baker. I mean, I just prefer Baker over McCaffrey. So I've had some things like that, but I do like Luke McCaffrey. Just haven't really had a chance to get him.
And Javon Baker is someone, at least in all of my drafts, that has really, since rookie draft season started, there's definite buzz around him. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's like the workouts or whatever else, but he goes early 3 from what I've seen a lot recently. So that's like speaking to what you're saying. Like, okay, if he drops late 3, you got some good value there probably in terms of market, at least, even if you don't necessarily love the guy. But he's someone that we talked about like pre-draft, like that's a guy to keep an eye out for. We didn't really necessarily love the draft capital landing spot maybe as much, but like those things change quickly as we've seen.
The landing spot we love. It's just that draft capital 4th round.
New England has a certain.
Yeah, he's got opportunity though, and it's kind of an ambiguous situation with him, Polk, like we mentioned earlier. So I mean, there's an opportunity there for him if he can take advantage of it. So we've talked about guys that we are surprised we got. Who are some guys that we're surprised that we haven't been able to get? Even if we like, I'll use my best example, and it's the top of the draft, but we haven't had anybody on the first round yet. So we'll get into the first round now, and it's Malik Neighbors for me. I love Malik Neighbors. He's a guy that I've got really graded really high in my prospect model. I just haven't been able to get him because at the 102, I've been taking Marvin Harrison Jr. And when I've traded back into the 106 to 108 range, and I've been landing other guys. And so Neighbors consistently goes. I think, Matt, you mentioned he's gone at the 103 in all of your drafts. He's gone at the 103 in almost all of mine. I did take him one time at the 105. But then Jacob Sanderson sent me a trade that I couldn't really refuse. And so I ended up with, I think, the 107 and the 108 maybe after trading Neighbors, something like that. I think I traded away a second also. So I just haven't really had a chance to get him. I still love the player. He is in kind of a blah situation. He's not going to be a guy that you can just say, oh, I'll just trade for him in 6 weeks. But I think that he could be a guy. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't think he's going to be a guy that you can trade for in 6 weeks into the season because of the situation, like because he's dropping in value. But I do think it could become a situation of 6 weeks in, he's available at the same price, but he's just somebody's willing to move him. Like if I went to the Malik Neighbors owner right now, they'd be like, get lost. Like I'm not even interested. But if I went to them maybe in 6 weeks, maybe like JSN, how JSN was kind of like, people were still trading him for a lot, but they were willing to move him. So I think that might be a guy, him and Drake May would be the two that I'm probably in season trying to acquire. It's going to be a high cost, but those are the types of guys that I'm going to be trying to go after because I haven't had as much as I would have liked. And Neighbors, I've got 0.
Yeah, Neighbors would be on my list. He'll come up later in our trade segment. I ended up just trading for a share, maybe overpaying. We'll judge that later. But yeah, he's the one guy I kind of had a little bit of FOMO on where it's like in my 20 leagues, I was like, I can't go into week 1 without a share. Like what if this guy just goes 10 catches, 180 yards and a touchdown week 1? You get touch after that. So like I just had to get him on the board. The other two guys that I'm a little annoyed I don't have any of right now is Ladd McConkey and Brian Thomas Jr. But again, I've still got 6 drafts left, Three of them are among my three biggest rebuilds. You two are in one of them that starts this weekend, that Joe Cronin League. So got the 111, 112, and 201 in that league. So I'll end up with a couple of those type shares. But Ladd and Brian Thomas Jr., I don't feel comfortable having no shares of. I do like them at a late first cost. I just haven't been able to draft them really. And then, Neighbors, I just got impatient and solved one of my FOMOs by just trading for him. But Brian, you have a larger sample. Is there anyone for you that fits this bill?
Yeah, there's definitely a few. I thought coming in before I started any of my rookie drafts, I was like, okay, I want to diversify between May Daniels and JJ McCarthy. That was like kind of my thought process. Coming into it, I thought I would be heaviest on Drake May for sure. I like him the most.
Yeah.
But sometimes you play the game of like we've talked about in other episodes, like trade back and try and get value and see if he'll drop to you. And if not, then you get the guy that's left over. And I've kind of had that happen to me a few times, and I'm not like upset about it, but I only have 3 shares of Drake May so far. I have 3 of Daniels, and JJ McCarthy I have 5. So I didn't expect to be 5 with JJ McCarthy to those other 2 with 3. I do have both Daniels and May in a couple drafts that are currently going on that I didn't count into this, but so it's going to be relatively equal. And then Brian Thomas Jr., I only have 4.
You loved him pre-draft too.
Yeah. And it's just it's
nice
just how things
spot.
it's how things have like shaken out a little bit that I've had a lot of like 109s and it's just like a lot of people.
Who are you taking at the 109 typically?
Worthy usually. I'll try and trade back, but like there's a lot of and maybe this is just my drafts, you guys can speak to this too, but like it seems like very, very consensus. Like if you're in the top 8, I'm not letting you trade back from 104 to 107 or whatever like that. They're like, I'll just take whoever's left. And then it seems like 109 to, I don't know, 20, whatever, like you said, 202, 203. Or, yeah, like people are like, it could be anybody. It could be Ladd McConkey, 109. It could be Brooks. It could be Worthy. It could be Keon Coleman. It's all over the place that it's hard to like play the game of like, oh, I can trade back or trade up for this guy. And, it's been a cluster.
Yeah, I got Brian Thomas Jr. at the 201 one time. That's the only share I've gotten. And it was funny because I had tweeted out about how I was just kind of I felt uncomfortable with Brian Thomas Jr.'s landing spot, more so than most. I think that his style and just the way the nature of the Jags offense, I think he could kind of get lost in the shuffle. And I think people took that as that he'll suck. And that's not what I'm saying. I think that he could just kind of, be one of the guys and not really dominate it. Like I think what people want him to. But then like the next day I got him at the 201. I was like, well, I mean, at the end of that tier, I'm great with it. I just don't want him at the 109 or the 110. And you mentioned the guy at the 109. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Keep going.
You mentioned the guy at the 109, Xavier Worthy, and I loved him pre-draft. I still love him. He was at the Chiefs, but I don't want him at the 109. Like I wanted to get that type of guy in like the early second or maybe the very late first. I'd be more comfortable there. But I don't really have any picks, and we talked about this kind of in the chat earlier that I don't have any picks I have not had any picks from the 109 to the 112. I basically traded all my late contender firsts. I'm just not a fan of the late first. I think that you can kind of combine those assets in season for a kind of a stud type player. And so that's what I did. So I didn't end up with any 109 to 112s. So I'm out of the Xavier Worthy business. So that's probably another guy that I'm a little bit disappointed I don't have any of. But I've gotten at the end of that tier, in that 201 spot, I've gotten Bo Nix several times, which I'm pretty excited about. I mean, he was awful at Auburn. Don't get me wrong. And he's maybe a check down artist. But the 12th QB off the board, and I think Sean Payton's way overrated, but I think Sean Payton's going to do everything he can to make sure that he doesn't look
12th
like a
player.
Yeah, 12th player
overall in the real draft.
Yeah, 12th player overall in the NFL draft. I don't even know what I said. I assume I said 12th QB. 12th player overall in the NFL draft, and I get to draft him at the 201. Yeah, sign me up for that.
I'm in the same boat as you, Todd, with Nix and Penix. I was talking shit about them over and over and over again. but then they get the draft capital and people don't seem to give a shit in our rookie drafts. And like, I have a decent amount. I have 6 shares of Penix and I have 4 of Knicks, and I didn't expect to really have any of either of them because I figured, okay, with the draft capital they got, I figured they would be like the 109, 110, 111 picks, and I haven't seen that really much at all.
So that's been an overarching theme of the early rookie drafts that have been completed over the first couple of weeks post NFL draft is like the market definitely sticking to their priors, sometimes in like a very hilarious degree. Jacob and I are in a league where Knicks fell to 202 because at 201 someone took Troy Franklin. And it's like, you took his day 3 wide receiver before the day 1 quarter. Like, that's definitely the funniest example of like sticking to your priors take lock that I've seen so far. But like, I think we see it with Javon Baker too, right? Who I've seen have a wide range of ADP, anywhere from late second to late third. And there was a lot of polling after the NFL draft, like, and you see it in your rookie drafts at times where, like, who do you prefer, Javon Baker or Jalen Polk? And like 45 to 50% of the market still prefers Javon Baker. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Maybe that turns out correct. I think we all were a little more interested in Baker's pre-draft profile, but like the team itself told you that not only did we draft this one guy higher, we drafted him like 60 overall spots in the draft higher, like almost 2 full rounds higher. That's how much more we like this guy. And they drafted like some offensive lineman from the Ivy League or some shit in between those guys. So they were totally fine missing out on Baker. I think you have to take that into account. So, to your point, Brian, about Knicks and Penix falling maybe a little bit past where they should. People are either sticking to their priors and or like overreacting probably a little bit to like gross landing spots from what I've seen so far.
And maybe not to switch gears too much, but Jonathan Brooks, who we haven't really touched on much. I was just thinking about this in terms of like shifting values and people having take lock. I know people liked him before the draft and like before he got injured and all that stuff. But I don't understand, and you guys can speak to this too, but in my drafts, it feels like the early drafts that I did like right after the NFL draft, he was like early to mid 2. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, overnight something happened. I don't know if he like released like a workout video or what the hell happened, but just doing biceps curls because he can't move still his lower body. But I don't know what it was. But all of a sudden he became like, sometimes he's 109 and goes at worst 201. And I was expecting to get like a good amount of him in like the 201 to 203 range. And I have 2 total shares because I kind of reached on him because like, all right, I want him a little bit, but like kind of what Matt's saying with his neighbor's trade, but I needed a little exposure. But it was weird to me that it seemingly came out of nowhere, that it was just like, oh yeah, there wasn't any type of update with his injury that I'm aware of. Like, what happened?
No, I didn't see that, or maybe I did, and just it changed so quickly I forgot about it. I thought he was kind of like instantly in that late 1 tier with Brian Thomas and like Knicks, and usually people, it seemed like, preferred Landon Worthy, but I thought he was like kind of late 1 immediately. Jesse Mueller, our boy, I think he's 109 for him. I saw him in one of our leagues trade like a projected late first in 2025 to grab that 109 pick to draft him. But I think Zoltan had a good tweet about this that I think explains it a little bit, where he was like, I don't particularly like Jonathan Brooks, and he's my Dynasty RB9. So I think it kind of speaks to that position after you get to the top, after we get out of the top 5 or 6 running backs that everybody likes in Dynasty. Once you start getting,
but if like, what does running back 9 mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like that might be worse than Dynasty receiver or whatever. Like, to me, like, that's great. That's like, sounds cool. And like, you can put in, but if everyone thinks Carolina's offense is shitty, which it seems like most people think that because they're devaluing the get, Bryce Young is what I think a lot of people think anyways, whether he is or isn't. They think he sucks. They think they're a disaster in terms of like team makeup. Why all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, running back, sign me up, like, for a team that's probably going to be losing a lot and not sure if they're a good team in general. I don't know.
I think they're going to be bad. But just to clarify the point, so the RB9 thing so Zoltan's saying he doesn't particularly like him, but he's RB9 for him. That's just speaking to the positional scarcity of the dynasty landscape generally right now. And just like, once you get outside of the top 7 or 8, then you get into, like Ken Walker, whoever else, James Cook, Pacheco. But I mean, the two selling points I think on Brooks is not only did people like him, but outside of his prospect profile, Carolina spent like $160 million on their offensive line this offseason, and their coach, Dave Canales, has talked multiple times in his opening press conferences about how much he wants to establish the run. And Bryce Young sucks. So, like, you can see a world where if Brooks is healthy, he's going to be a pivotal part of the offense, I think.
A lot of 20 carries for 48 yards and no touchdowns.
Unless Brooks is really good. I mean, we've seen.
No, he might be. Yeah, I'm just saying, like,
the touchdowns
I just don't understand
that.
I didn't understand the shift. That's all I mean. For like, he's been hurt, he's still hurt. It was weird to me.
All right, I got a question for y'all. So, one thing I've been bouncing around in my head is who are some guys, outside of obviously the top 8, because those guys are studs. Who are some guys here that you might be interested in for a tank team? I guess we could even look at it within the top 8. And so I'll give a couple here, and they're all they're kind of bunched together in the beginning of the second. So maybe I'm cheating. But a guy that it kind of didn't really hit me until about halfway through my drafts. But I really like Trey Benson as a guy for a tank team that is planning to contend in 2025. So Matt may try to argue that I'm trying to time the market on Trey Benson. I'd argue that I'm just going to wait another year for James Conner to get one more year older. So I like Trey Benson as a guy that I just take on my tank team. I'm planning to contend in 2025. And by then, I'm hoping maybe he's the starter. If at worst, maybe he's like in a 50-50 split. I would expect it to not be a 50-50 split this year. So another aspect that's nice is that he's not going to give me many points toward my possible points to hurt me for my tank job. So that's one. Obviously, Penix Jr. I think that one kind of goes without saying.
Well, hold on. That goes without saying. But so that's where I would push back on that, because if I know I'm not competing in 2024, if I know I'm still a year plus away, I really like Benson for any type of build, and I have been drafting Benson over Penix. But Penix would be my number one target in the early to mid second if I knew I was a tanking team. And he's the only guy in that tier or the tier right after Benson that I would consider taking over Benson if I'm tanking in 2024, because I do think that if you're starting a long-term rebuild or you're in the middle of one, Penix is the number one guy I think I'm targeting.
Number one.
In that 201 to 208.
Especially if you're a team that's tanking in 2024 and you're like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to compete much in 2025. Like, if he's not on the team, I'm really not sure what you're doing. Like, he should be your prime guy to have on that.
So he's the one guy in that situation I think I'd take over Benson. But yeah, other than that, I love Benson. I like him even on a contending team. You never know when his opportunity will pop up.
I agree. I agree. But it kind of hit me because like when I have a rebuild, I'm really just staying away from running backs. I think that's kind of consensus.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you're saying he was kind of like an exception to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's kind of an exception to it because I view him as a guy that's going to get an opportunity to be the starter at some point. Whether he takes that and runs with it, I don't know. But I think he's a guy that has the opportunity to be like a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split, which to be honest is kind of like outside of like your top 8 running backs. That's kind of all you're looking for is like, can I get a guy that's got a 60-40 split? That'd be really nice to have.
Feels kind of Tajay Spears.
Yeah, I agree, and that's a guy that probably
with 2 ACLs.
Yeah, with 2 ACLs. But there's the one. I probably the one big difference with them is that Benson's in an offense that with Kyler Murray, your running back efficiency seems to be better. I don't know that James Conner is a super efficient running back, but he's been pretty efficient for the Cardinals. So. As far as
real quick, James Conner led the NFL in 20+ yard runs last year, which is a crazy stat.
Crazy, yeah. So Trey Benson, I really do like him on a tank team. Yeah, like you said, Matt, he's fine on a contender as well. But on a tank team, I think he's a nice piece that I would not typically acquire. But I don't know that there's a huge difference. I guess the third round draft capital between him and Brooks, that's notable. But as far as like the player and everything, like I don't know that there's that massive of a difference between maybe like somebody taking Brooks at the 110 and maybe I can get Benson at the 203 or the 204.
Brian, is there anyone in this range that you're kind of changing who you're targeting depending on your team build? Or just like kind of what we said?
I think a lot, like all the wide receivers, I don't think they're going to hurt your tank. I don't think like any of the receivers in this range, they're not going to disrupt what you're trying to do. And then it's a ceiling swing at that. Like in a tank situation, I'm probably not like going after like Ricky Pearsall.
Oh, see, like I'm cool with him in the tank because I feel like you're kind of getting a discount on him. Like, let's say that Ayuk or Debo were traded tomorrow. He's moving up to what? The 202?
203. I think Coleman would still be ahead.
I feel like I think
like Pearsall would jump him.
I just don't ever know.
Somewhere in there.
I think he's like probably a pretty good football player and he'll probably do decent stuff in their system. I just don't know. For me personally, I didn't really see it much in college. He obviously got drafted high.
It's kind of the problem with all of these guys, though, is the issue. This whole class is like that.
Yeah, so that's
Coleman, Pearsall, Leggett, A.D. Mitchell, Polk, Roman Wilson.
That's what's fun about
such
it.
A weak,
right?
Yeah, Lad McConkey. Like it's just such a weak profile for these guys.
But to Brian's point, that allows an environment where, like Brian's saying, you can pick your guys and just say, okay, my guy is A.D. Mitchell, and if your guy is Pearsall, cool, you take him, I'll take my guy. So I'm kind of with Brian on that, though. Like in terms of, I have A.D. Mitchell and Leggett ahead of Pearsall. I just didn't love Pearsall too, and I am a little bit worried to Brian's point about not taking him on like a rebuild team where your main goal is not production, but it's to maintain or raise value. And I would be a little bit worried about him if they don't trade Ayuk or Debo.
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, can you even get like a late second at the end of this year if he just has like a redshirt year or, whatever, or like, hit 20 catches for 200 yards.
Pearsall will be 24 in early September. So like, just in terms of like his window for like Dynasty where people are excited about him, even if he has a great or a very good start to his career, his window is going to be smaller, smaller inherently. We know this from hundreds of players before him, right? So it just the margin for error and the window of opportunity to me is just like in a tank. Like I'm cool with Ricky Pearsall. I'm not like writing him off or anything like that. It's just it's a different situation for sure. There's a couple of those older guys where it's just like, I don't know if I would want to do that in a tank. Yeah. And if I can't get like a quick turnaround flip for him, like the hope would be Pearsall starts the season well, like Todd's saying, one of those two big receivers gets traded. Maybe Kittle goes down or something like, all those things are all pretty possible. And then you can flip him before you really have to worry about all the shit that I'm kind of worried about, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So before we get to the trades, one other thing I wanted to cover is if there's a guy in these middle two rounds, like the second or third round, that you have no shares of or very little shares of. And the reason I say the second or third round is because theoretically we should have all had access to them. So there's got to be somewhat of an intentional fade. Like if you just can't draft Neighbors because he's 103 and you don't have a top 3 pick, that's whatever. But so the guy for me would be Ben Sinnott. I just have no shares of him, and I've had plenty of shots in the late second. And I just kind of prefer some of the guys that we have been talking about. Like I'd rather have Marshawn Lloyd than him, and Marshawn Lloyd almost never goes before him. And then Roman Wilson, Polk, guys like that I'd rather have. And I think part of that is Sinnott's profile to me doesn't really scream, a lot of upside. It seems like maybe he's a good player. Maybe he's Pat Freiermuth. I'm not sure that he's George Kittle or like that upper tier type prospect. And the tight end landscape, I think, is actually deeper than it ever has been. And that's always been kind of a joke the last couple of years. And sometimes it turns out not to be true. And I think we finally have gotten to a place where it is true. There is a lot of tight end depth. And I just don't care if I miss out on him that much, really. But what about you, Todd?
That's an interesting one because I actually really like him. So I really like him in that like 210, 211 range, which is kind of where he goes. The issue is that I've had several picks in the 208, 209 slots. And I mentioned that the guy that I'm taking there is Jalen Polk. So I would have like Polk one spot ahead of Sennett. And I've kind of left myself. I've only had 2 shares of Sennett. So I got him one time at the 301 and I got him one time at the 311 in that Safe Leagues League. But there's been several times where I've been trying to trade in for Ben Sennett. One time he went to the 306 and then another one at the 308. And I tried for several picks to trade in, and I was just unsuccessful. So there's been a couple where that's happened. I do really like him, but I don't really like anybody here in the late second after Jalen Polk besides Sennett. And that's kind of so it's kind of like Sennett, like by default, that I like him because I just don't really like the value of a late second spent on 4th round running back Jalen Wright or these 3rd round receivers taking them, or a 4th round receiver taking them in the late second. Like, to me, if that's what I end up spending my late second on, then I've done my team a disservice by not trading it before now. So like I have to pull the trigger on a 3rd round Roman Wilson or a 3rd round Malachi Corley or 4th round Jalen Wright. To me, that's just like I've done my team a disservice at that point because I should have traded it earlier in the year or earlier in the offseason. But that's just like my style of plays. I want to kind of hang out around the better draft capital players, and Ben Sennett going 2nd round, right? So like that's pretty good draft capital for a tight end. So 210, 211, I do like that.
Roman Wilson, I like. I passed on at least one Sennett share for Roman Wilson. I don't mind that, but I do know that the majority don't agree with that. Do a tiebreaker for us, Brian. Do you like or not like, or are you in between on the Sennett price?
I don't have a strong opinion about him. I'm not sure.
That works. Sometimes.
Yeah. That like I kind of troll some people like, oh, he played fullback in college, and
All right. So who are you taking late second? Who's the guy that you're targeting? Once Jalen Polk's gone, usually you've got like Corum and Polk are basically gone by like the 209. Assume Ben Sennett's gone 210. Who are you taking is the next best available in your view? So just to kind of give you an idea of who's available, you've got guys like Jalen Wright, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, Marshawn Lloyd, Jermaine Burton. Those are a lot of the guys that people are taking late second, including Ben Sennett. So I mean, we can just include him in this if you'd like.
I don't want to pick in that range.
Yeah, see, that's where I am too. All of those guys to me are early to mid 3rd value type plays. And if I get to take Marshawn Lloyd at the 304, cool. Like I'm great with that. If I get to take Jalen Wright at the 304, nice. Jermaine Burton, 302. All right, cool. But if I have to pull the trigger on any of these guys, 210 to 212, like I said, I just feel like I've done my team a disservice.
Yeah, I'm usually I would try and see if I can package, like if I have a couple 2s, package that to move up or trade back, like you're saying. Like I would like Javon Baker. I like Jatavion Sanders probably more than Sennett at price.
Really?
Just because it's a cheaper, I think a higher upside. It's more likely to crash and burn, but higher upside. I'm not a big Sennett guy. But I that being said, I have 4 of him as well. So like I've just kind of diversified, and I can look smart and dumb at every turn.
Well, to give kind of the listener an idea of what 4 even means. So you've got 46 that you've completed. You've got 4 been Senate, whatever it is.
So it's like
So you're basically
Eight-
right at
eight-
market, which is about 8.5%
Eight-
of
eight and a
4
half,
divided
yeah.
by 46. So you're like right at market with Ben Senate. So when Matt asked you the question, you said, I really don't have a take. You really didn't have a take. You really just are right at market on him.
Yeah. I've in years past, and we've talked about this before. I've gone all in, and I think there's a certain level of, I don't want to say arrogance, but like I'm smart and everyone else is dumb kind of thing. Like why isn't everyone else picking this guy? And I don't want to be overexposed to that player, whoever he is, because that person exists. Those people exist in this draft, just like every other draft. I don't want to be that guy that's holding 15 shares of Giammi Brown and Traylon Burks.
Yeah. So that kind of goes into what my next question was going to be before we hit into the trades is how are we collectively attacking the 2024 rookie drafts differently than 2023 or maybe last year or 2022? And so for you, it sounds like you're really trying to diversify. For me, and I've been talking about this all off season, so you're probably going to roll your eyes when you hear it. But for me, it's really trying to move back and get kind of, especially getting in with that first tier in all the way up to the 108, trying to get back there. And that's why I haven't ended up with any Malik Neighbors. And that's why I don't have any Jaden Daniels, because they don't get back there. So that does hurt me from a diversification standpoint. But I'm really not a Rome Odunze fan, but I've got 2 Rome Odunze out of 12 leagues. So I'm above market on him. So I would say I'm probably not as diversified as much as you, Brian, but I'm much more diversified than I have been in the past. So I'm probably maybe splitting the difference a little bit. And then just trying to gain value. I'm really trying to kind of play the ADP board and where guys go and get in and out of the pockets that I like and don't like. So like I said earlier, I've had no picks so far, 109 to 112. I do have one pick at the 110 in a draft that hasn't happened yet. And it's the league that Matt referred to earlier where he has like the 111, 112, and 201. So I probably won't be able to trade back with that one because I have the 202. So I'll probably be stuck drafting the 110 there and maybe just get one share of a guy that I've not had an opportunity to get yet. But yeah, I think trying to be a little bit more cautious and be a little bit more diversified and also trading out of the spots of the pockets that I don't like. So like I love the pocket of 201 to 204. Like that's the 201 is one of my favorite picks in the draft because you get one of the 109 to the 201 tier of Worthy, Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey, Jonathan Brooks, Bo Nix. And twice I've gotten Bo Nix. And so I'm just like really happy about that. So I think, yeah, getting into the spots that I like and being willing to just take who you leave me instead of being like, okay, I have to trade up one spot here because if I don't get this player, I'm going to lose my mind. Like that's what I used to do. And that kind of cooked me a lot because I would just give away free thirds in the future, things like that. And it would really kind of hurt me down the road.
It's funny because it's because every year, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, and it's even still you find those guys that you relate to or you like watching the most or you're rooting for the landing spot or whatever the thing is. They ran a 4.240, whatever the thing is. And it's really easy to just fall in love with one person and then like just block all the red flags for him and ignore all the green flags maybe for other players. And I know I've done that.
Giving up.
Or the value you're giving up, exactly. But like if it's a coin flip in ADP, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to just go all in on one of those guys. Like I ignored Chris Olave because of X, Y, and Z that we don't need to get into as a rookie. That being said, after his rookie season, I was like, okay, well, I have to get Olave. You overpay for Chris Olave, and then the return on this past season wasn't what you had to pay for Chris Olave last offseason, right? So like those are kind of the thing. Like if you miss on Garrett Wilson, the hype was only stronger. Like there's those couple guys that, like, like Matt said, like if Neighbors has whatever he said he had 180 yards in the first game of the season. Okay, Malik Neighbors he's an untouchable now that you gotta pay Justin Jefferson ask prices against, what in reality, there's no way that he's going to live up to Justin Jefferson's price tag in that short amount of time. But it's like you're saying, Todd, you're going to give away value. You're going to give away opportunity. You're going to pigeonhole yourself into this situation that just wasn't necessary instead of just staying fluid and flexible like we always preach.
Yeah, and that's the only thing that I noticed that's different about this year than some of the past years. I think it is kind of like what you mentioned, Todd. Up until like the first 2 rounds, I would say, have very, very clearly defined tiers that I almost completely agree with the market on who belongs in which tier. Like Caleb, Marvin, then Neighbors through May 3 through 6, and then Bowers and Odunze at 7 and 8, and those are like 3 different tiers. And then you have the Worthy, Brian Thomas, Ladd, Brooks, Nix tier. And it seems like everybody agrees with that for the most part. And anywhere I can, I'm trying to, like you said, move to the back of that tier. And I think the tiers are more strictly and clearly defined than I remember seeing in the past. Maybe that's not true, but that I remember.
Yeah, I think if you're in a league where, I've got leagues like this where most of the players in the league are only in one league, or maybe they're just in a couple leagues, it might be smart. And I wish I had done this because all my home leagues are already drafted, but it might be smart to trade into the pick right outside of the tier. Maybe not the 109 might be a questionable
in case someone falls.
Yeah, because I would go ahead and expect someone to fall, especially in those leagues. Maybe the leagues where people are just abiding by ADP, it doesn't happen as much. But your leagues where people are kind of like don't really give a shit about ADP, like at the 202, you might be getting Bo Nix, or at the, we talked about the 209 or so as being kind of like the end of a tier break. You might be able to get, you did this in one league, Matt. You might be able to get a Michael Penix Jr. You might be able to get a Trey Benson back there, or maybe AD Mitchell falls back to so like going ahead and like pre-draft trading into one of these tier break spots. You could do it at the 109 in some of those leagues and just kind of cross your fingers. The problem with doing it at the 109 is you're already going to pay quite a premium for that pick. So I probably wouldn't recommend that one. But there was in one league, I had the 109 where I traded back from, I think the 102. I think I traded the 102 for the 104 and the 109. That's what it was. And when I got back to the 109, I was like, that's like I hate that pick. So I might have traded back again. Well, I actually ended up trading up from the 109 to the 108. I gave up my 25-2 on a contender to go from the 109 to the 108 and took Rome Odunze. It may not be totally out of question to get in from the 109 to the 108. But yeah, I think, you kind of, when you were talking about the tiers, it made me think it might be smart to try to jump in at the end of that tier before. You got to do it before the draft because somebody's gonna be licking their chops when they get them if you don't.
So that actually, So that's a great natural segue to the trade segment because we'll just mention a few trades that we've made over the last week or two, whether they involve picks or not. Talk about them a little bit. And the first trade I'll mention involves the 109. It's a very simple trade. Brian, you're in this league. I caught some shit after I made this trade because I'm known in the streets as somewhat of a JSN hater. And I traded 109 straight up for JSN. And it's because I've seen people trade 108 for JSN. I think his value falls somewhere between 108 and 109. I have 3 or 4 more 109s to go that I'm going to draft worthy probably. And just seem like decent value. And I don't have it. That's my only JSN share. So a little bit of a diversification play. And I didn't mind the value. What you guys are fine with that, right? Because Todd, I know you're kind of interested in trading for JSN at cost right now.
Yeah, I like that for JSN, and that kind of leads me to you reminded me that I have the 110 in that league. I might offer the 110 for JSN in that league and just kind of see if that's possible.
It's funny.
Hopefully you don't have JSN so that I can make that.
No, I did have JSN, and I traded it to our boy Jake for his first round pick in the season.
And he's a big JSN guy, so that one may not work.
Yeah, it might not. But never hurts to try. Any trade that you have recently, Todd?
Yeah, I've got one that I'll do. So I traded away T. Higgins and I believe a 25 third. This is on a tank team. T. Higgins and a 25 third for Bryce Young, and it's a 14 teamer and the 2.13. So I'm trying to pull up who I took with that 2.13, but it's a tank team. And my only quarterback I had drafted earlier in the draft was Drake May. So I had tanked the team out by basically only having receivers and draft picks. So I had no tight end, no quarterback, no running back in order to really deplete my possible points. So Drake May was my only quarterback, and then added Bryce Young via T. Higgins. So I also got with the 2.13, I got Jalen Polk. So that was I'm fairly big fan of Polk at that value. I mean, you're getting a second round, early second round draft pick. Yeah. So I would say Jalen Polk at the 2.13 in that draft was one of my best values in rookie drafts.
I have a unique trade to share with you, and I'm curious what you guys think. Because on the surface, I think it made too much sense, but then you have to get the context of what my team is at. So I have an older team. It's an older Zoltan that I was kind of a contender for 2 or 3, 4 years since it started. I have the Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones. It's similar to the back to school league, Todd. All older guys. I'm trying to get younger. I've started to kind of sell people off, right? I'm trying to pivot into basically being bad this upcoming year, and kind of hitting the reset button. I've earned it, I think, at this point. But I had an offer. I had 111. I had 204. And I got offered Tyreek Hill for those 2 picks. So I'm trying to move towards rebuilding, and I'm taking on a guy that scores lots of points that's on the older side of things for 111 and 204.
Flipping more in September when he's scoring 25.
The thought process is I think Tyreek Hill is worth more than 111 and 204.
Yeah.
I didn't really care about Bo Nix was available. That's what the person took at 111. I didn't really care about getting any more Lad McConkey or something like that at 111. And then 204, he took Todd's boy, Ben Sinote.
So you're thinking, thinking you can.
It's a tight end premium 2 tight end league.
Not 2 tight end.
That is a little early for my boy Ben Sinote.
So the only thing I'd make sure of, it's a pretty active league. It's not one of those dead leagues we talk about where there's half the league isn't really trying to actively trade, because that would be my only reservation. Otherwise, I think it's definitely a good plan.
So it's not the most active league, I wouldn't say, but it's not a dead league either. It's somewhere in the middle. But I think Tyreek is a guy that brings the boring non-traders out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Someone's going to pay
for him.
Yeah.
They might not pay for T. Higgins or somebody like that is kind of maybe more of a dynasty darling, that they just don't see the production and the potential that others do.
Yeah.
Tyreek, I think I could probably get a nice little something early midseason. And if we talk about flexibility all the time, it's something that if I do want to run it back another year because Tyreek's just going off or something like that, I guess I could try and do that. But my goal initially was to rebuild, and then Tyreek Hill. To me, you can't turn that down.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you'll be able to trade him for more in the future. I would be surprised if you couldn't. So Brian, you're in this league. Todd, you want me to give you a couple cousin Pat trades from a few days
let's hear
ago?
what cousin Pat's been up to.
So we made 2 trades in the same league. Both involve some rookies. So one of them is that Neighbors trade that I was telling you guys about, where I didn't have any shares and it was bothering me. So I traded him Jahmyr Gibbs and Tyler Algier. And I got back Malik Neighbors and Ray Davis. Ray Davis is kind of a guy I like more than most in that like mid to late third range. But essentially Gibbs for Neighbors basically. And I'd rather have Ray Davis and Algier, but I don't care either way. So Neighbors or Gibbs, Todd, you taking Gibbs there?
All right. So I'm going to answer your question, but first I'll preface it with, I had a draft, home league draft in person over last weekend, and Neighbors was on the board at I want to say the 106 still. And I came in offering Jonathan Taylor straight up. They ended up passing on my deal and taking a different trade. I don't remember exactly what they got, but I thought my trade was actually better. I think they traded out of the top 8. But anyways, and they got, and the person traded in and got Neighbors, obviously. But I offered Taylor, and I thought it was a pretty good offer. Because they had no interest in Neighbors. They didn't want a receiver. They were one of those teams that had a ton of receivers, and they were just kind of like, I think they needed a running back. Was the situation? They got Brooks plus a bunch of other stuff.
Todd, for a live draft, can you kind of quickly break it down for us? Is it like, I don't know if you watch Survivor or not, but is it like a live tribal where like people are like pulling each other aside and like whispering in each other's ears?
Every time, every time someone's on the clock. So this year. So we've done that. We did the startup in person. We've done every rookie draft in person. So we've done 5 rookie drafts now. And I've done several other home leagues that I've done in person also. This one's always the most intense because there's just so much more history with this league. And so, you're getting people are pulling each other. This year we implemented a 15-minute clock. So we did it at a sport. One of our friends has a sports bar, and we had a clock, like a ticker. And so we had that clocking down. But after about like the first 6 or 8 picks, we had the clock going, but we were just ignoring it. So we could really fulfill all the trade negotiations. But if you ever have the chance to do the in-person rookie draft, they're a lot of fun because literally,
they're great.
Almost every pick is either getting traded or nearly getting traded.
I'm just like picturing you all like sitting at a table and you just like tap your friend on the shoulder and just like, can you meet me by the bathroom? Like we got to talk about
every time. And then there'll be times where like I didn't have many picks in this draft. So there was a couple times where I was like, people were negotiating trade and they were on the clock, and I was just like going and just hanging out and sitting down with them. I was like, guys, I'm not trying to trade in. I'm just hanging out.
I'll be your mediator.
Yeah, exactly. But if you ever have a chance to do that, for sure.
Yeah, I played that role before.
I think that would be a lot of fun if you had some type of like, I know this is not probably feasible for most people, but like some type of like destination where you would just be like, hey, let's meet in this place, long weekend kind of thing. And like, if we had like people from different areas and that would be like our group, that would be absolutely chaotic. Just like,
that would be
all the backdoor deals. And oh man, I think that's a lot of fun. So anyone listening, if you have that opportunity or if you do that already, let us know the stories. I'm sure there's some crazy ones that I want to hear about them.
I mean, you guys already know some of the after midnight trades I get done. I don't even want to know what kind of deals I'd make in that environment. All right. Todd, you didn't give me a verdict, actually. I think you like Gibbs more than Neighbors, but tell me I'm wrong.
I would probably lean Gibbs. I think Taylor is where I would probably draw the line. I would prefer Neighbors to Taylor. I would prefer Gibbs to Neighbors. So that tells me that I've got Neighbors worth like the RB, what is that, RB4-ish. So Bijan, Bijan, Gibbs, and Brees, I would take over Neighbors. Then
take Neighbors over CMC.
Yeah, if I'm like a dog
that might be team dependent.
If I'm like a true I'm trying to win a ship this year, I'm probably just holding CMC.
Yeah.
Anything else, I would trade CMC for Neighbors.
Same for you, Brian. That Gibbs a little too high of a price there.
I wouldn't say it's a little too high though. I think it's moderately fair, but I'd lean.
It's fine, but yeah.
I got a pretty interesting. I think I'm trying to find it right now while you were talking. Oh man, yeah, it's one that I can't do. I don't think, but I'm curious what you guys think about this. This is unrelated to rookies in general, but I have a team where I have Kyler and Dak, and then I was able to get 101 this year. So, Caleb, I have.
Are you a contender?
Sorry,
so the scenario hasn't happened yet. The scenario hasn't happened yet.
Okay, I was about to snap, but yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, I was offered CMC for Kyler. So on the surface, I think Kyler's worth more, obviously, short term, long term, whatever. But in the situation, does that change anything for you guys that I have? Or no, I don't have Caleb. I have Anthony Richardson. So it's Anthony Richardson, Kyler, and Dak.
Caleb.
Not Caleb. Not Caleb. Sorry. I had 102, I think, or I had a high draft pick because I was tanking. I think I ended up with 102 or 103. So I got Neighbors.
So the question is, would you, in this situation, trade Kyler for CMC? Matt, I'll let you answer it first.
And then before you answer, would it change if it was Dak? So, like, are you trading Dak? Like, on the surface, I don't know if I would trade either of those guys if I just had two quarterbacks. But when you have three, does that change anything for either of you?
Yeah, it does. So last year in that league that we're in, Cream, I was kind of set at quarterback, and I traded Dak for CMC. Zero regrets. I would make that trade again today. But I also don't blame people that wouldn't. I don't think I would trade Kyler for CMC even in that scenario. I think I'd want something on top.
Yeah, there's no scenario where I'd trade Kyler for CMC. Is there a scenario where I would trade Dak for CMC? Probably not. It would have to be a wild one. Like I've got some teams where Deshaun Watson's my QB3. Like, let's say I've got Deshaun Watson's my QB3 and I have like Penix Jr. and I'm trying to shed one and one of them's Dak. And I'm like trying to shed Dak. Like, who can I trade Dak to? And like nobody in the league, because that happens. Like you get in a situation where everybody's got a QB2 and somebody's like, Derek Carr's my QB3, like QB2. Like, I don't want Kyler. I don't want to trade Kyler for Garrett Wilson,
for the
or like
price,
whatever it is. Right. Yeah, and so you're kind of stuck with all these quarterbacks. And if it came down to it in that situation, I'd be okay trading Dak for CMC. Absolutely. It doesn't matter the situation. I'm not trading Kyler for CMC though.
Yeah, I agree. So my natural inclination was to, okay, I'm going to counter with Dak, but then I was like, I don't know if I want to do that either. And then I'm looking now. This team is weird because I've had high draft picks the last 2 years, obviously by what you're about to hear, but I have Anthony Richardson, I have Kyler, I have Dak, I have Bijan, I have Jahmyr Gibbs. So I would have, if I got CMC, that running back, that's like an old school like redraft, like kick the shit out of people, ground and pound. Like that's the three of the top four running backs in Dynasty, pretty unquestionably. It's an interesting concept, but like I agree, I don't think you can do Kyler and Dak. I would probably ask for some type of plus, and then he's not going to accept it if I ask any plus. Probably if he's asking for Kyler,
he's already asking for Kyler. I bet he won't even accept Dak. But
yeah,
maybe he offered you for Kyler, and he was thinking you would counter with Dak.
Yeah, I would do Dak straight up, but I'm also I think higher on CMC than a lot of people in Dynasty. I'm just not scared of his age. And maybe I should be, but I'm not.
Well, I love CMC.
What I'm scared of, here's what I'm scared of, and this is kind of shifting how I'm kind of playing Dynasty. So I went for a long time just playing the value game of like, all I really care about is value. Give me my value, and then my points will kind of show for themselves based on how my team's value adds up. And then I think probably within the last year to year and a half, I shifted to the buying points mode of like, hey, let me try to get my projected points a little bit higher. What move can I make and make incremental gains on my projected points? Like, let me trade DeAndre Swift and a second to upgrade to Tony Pollard. And like those types of moves have just like really burned me, and they've kind of hurt my team value on several leagues. And so I think I'm going to I'm shifting back to the value game and give me guys that are going to hold value. That doesn't mean that I'm going to trade away points for free. Like, it just means that I'm going to hold value and not trade value for points. When you have to make a move to like kind of fill out the roster, like, okay, obviously that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like the Dak for CMC trade kind of goes right into in a year, CMC's value could kind of go in the tank. And now I've traded like a 3rd round startup pick for a 7th round startup pick. Like, and that it's tough. Like, Dak, CMC's going to score a shit ton of points. But that's kind of like that one is where the line gets blurry for me, because CMC scores so many points.
He's almost in a class of his own, right?
He's right.
He's not like a David Montgomery type. Yeah.
It's not like a Tony Pollard.
He's transcendent.
Yeah. So I don't know. That one's tough.
There's not So go ahead, Matt.
No, I was going to get to my next trade. So if you had a finishing point.
I was just going to say, you don't have to, like, with most running backs, you have to like project and extrapolate, and that's not what CMC is. You just hope that he's healthy, and that's the only hold up.
Wheels up. Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget this time last year, Eckler seemed like an insane a guy that's about to just go off. Maybe not quite to the CMC level, but he was right there. Like, if you look at redraft, he was like right behind him. And this is now the age that CMC is now that Eckler was last year. I think CMC is a different level of player. Like, don't get me wrong. But like we did probably sit here and say, oh, Eckler's going to give us 2 more awesome years. And here we are. Like, you can barely trade Eckler for a Ben Sinnott.
Well, I know we're splitting. Oh, okay, never mind. I was going to say CMC's a year younger, but you're talking about Eckler last year. So, yeah.
Eckler last year and CMC.
He's the same in general. Like, I mean, massive producer.
And I just think CMC's a different level of player. But I understand what you're saying. The wheels could fall off at any time, and nobody should be surprised after 27. I mean, usually we say 25 or 26.
I hate to beat this to a dead horse because we've been hammering this one, but I think it's an interesting scenario. This is also one that I think I talked about this during the season. I'd be a lot more comfortable making closer to a trade deadline when I'm like, okay, all I have, maybe I already have the buy, and like I'm so much closer to knowing that I get CMC in the playoffs. Whereas buying him now is just, I mean, buying any player now, but especially a running back, especially a guy that you are expecting just this year production, you hope to get next year as well, but like this year is what you're really paying for. I would be a lot more comfortable making that move like week 10 or something.
Yeah, I mean, my only thing with that is it could end up costing you a little bit more in season if he's coming off a string of 3 straight 30-point games. And then the other thing I would say, and I think me and you have just kind of disagreed about this in the past, and I don't know if there's a right answer. It might be yours because it's a little bit safer. But if I'm going to buy my studs, I like to do it early so they help me secure the bye week, because nothing matters more to your playoff success than having that bye week.
I agree. I think that I don't think it's a difference of philosophy there. I think it's a difference of probably I shove my chips probably later than you do. I probably tank for too long. I probably tank for on average maybe a half season longer than you do, and I probably go to a season with. I have probably more tanks, which it hurts my ROI, but I probably go into more seasons with, like, I try to go into a season with a juggernaut.
Yeah, with like more loaded.
CMC may not be the difference in me getting the bye, but he would be the difference in me winning the championship. Would probably be the way I would look at it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Any other trades that you made in between like the 102 to like 104 range to get back into the 106 to 107, 108 range? I've made 2 so far. One of them was the Neighbors trade that I mentioned earlier, where I traded the 105 and I got I traded the 105 and like the 202 for 106 and 108. So I traded Neighbors and whoever the 202 became for Brock Bowers and JJ McCarthy. And then another one that I mentioned also earlier, was I traded the 102 for the 104 and the 109. And then I ended up moving up from the 109 to the 108. So that's basically Marvin Harrison Jr. for Drake May and Roma Dunze. And then I also had to kick in that 25 second when I moved up.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I've made a lot closer to Marvin than most people, I think. So I love that trade. The only trade I made like that was one of the first rookie drafts that I did. Brian's in this league, but our friend Dave Carey, I had the 103, traded out of that spot for the 106 and 207. So I traded Neighbors and I got back JJ McCarthy and Xavier Legette. I don't love that trade because I was hoping May fell to me. And then to me, that would just be a free mid-second. That's a gamble you kind of take. But like half the market likes JJ McCarthy more than Drake May. He's in a fantastic situation. I still don't mind the trade. If Legette hits, that gives me another out to possibly win or not lose the trade by much. So that's the only trade I've made involving like the 103 to 106 all draft season, I think.
I've tried to trade back, and like what I mentioned earlier, like most people are just not having it. Like they're seeing it kind of similarly or hearing it similarly. That being said, I actually traded up once. I didn't expect this at all. In this draft, I had 104 and 108, and I was trying to see if I could get 104 and turn it into 106 plus something, 107 plus something, and just have like the two last guys of that tier, like we're always talking about. That seemed like an ideal scenario for me. I didn't really want to get a quarterback. I already have Allen and Burrow on that team, but I knew like 104 would be Daniels or whoever you view 104 quarterback as, not Caleb. And out of nowhere, I got an offer, and the person at 103 must have been thinking, "Oh, I'll trade back and just whoever that's left over and get a plus," like kind of what you're talking about. I just think that they probably didn't ask for enough value back from me. So I gave them a 25 second that they're probably thinking is like early to mid 25 second, and then 108 for his 103. So I ended up getting 103 and 104 instead of 106 or 7 and 8. So it worked out nicely. I got another Neighbors. That was an accidental Neighbors share, but
and I like that. I like that because, like we talked about, like that 7-8 is a whole different tier to me. Like to me, Rome and Bowers, as much as I like them, they're a tier below the quarterbacks for me. So, if I was moving back to the 108 instead of the 106, I would have needed more than that 207 that I got to do that trade. So yeah, I love that value for you. Todd, the last Cousin Pat trade that I'll mention does not involve any draft picks, but it does involve a rookie. And our friend Jacob Sanderson, he kind of put in our group chat like a week or so back that got me thinking about how good the ancillary numbers for Jalen Waddle are and why he thinks he's a good buy. Kind of looked into it more, agreed with him. So I've been buying a few Waddle shares.
You have.
And so I traded Puka Nacua, and I got back Jalen Waddle and Trey Benson. And I think a lot of people would take the Puka side on that. And I think a lot of that kind of speaks to how much I like Benson a whole lot. I wanted to be overweight on Benson.
Now, did you trade for Benson, or did you trade for a pick that you selected Benson?
It was after the rookie draft. So so the rookies were on the team. So I sent him Puka, and then I got back Waddle and Trey Benson.
You a contender or a rebuild?
I will be contending this year. I wasn't last year. I will definitely, like, I have Jalen Hurts, Dak, Waddle, London, Neighbors, Trey McBride. So I'll be contending this year, hopefully.
I probably prefer Puka in that deal, but I really don't mind it. And you talking about Waddle is making me think like maybe I should go and just kind of tap the Waddle manager on the shoulder and say, hey, are you tired of this whole, Dolphins situation? Do you want to trade him? Because I always talk about getting out of the glob, and I would definitely have Waddle in the glob, but I'm looking for guys that can surpass the glob, and Waddle is a talent that probably could. It's probably going to happen sooner rather than later for him to surpass the glob, but he is a nice.
It's going to have to happen soon. I don't think it can fully wait till a Tyreek retirement. I think he has to stay healthy and put up like a 16-plus point per game season.
Yeah.
Not like 18 or 20, but like 16-plus he has to do, I think.
Yeah, and the numbers that Tyreek put up last year, maybe he just gives away a little bit of those to Waddle, and that could be enough to be the difference. So I think you didn't do a hard sell on him, but you did enough to win the over on Waddle. I might at least just go. I'm not going to go rampant or a rampage, but I might just tap on some shoulders, see what's up.
Yeah, I think that's worth doing right now, honestly.
By the bathroom.
All right. Well, Brian's yawned like 16 times in the last 5 minutes, and the Celtics game is over, long over. So I'm sure Brian's ready to get some sleep. He's moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals, so good for him. Matt, Denver Nuggets fan.
Oh yeah, man.
You were down bad, and here you are. You're living to continue to live to fight it, see another day. So we will wrap it there. Thanks for joining the Dynasty Market Watch, presented by Bulletproof Family Podcast, where yesterday's price is not today's price. I'm Todd at Dynasty SFlex. Brian is at Brian_O'Leary1, and Matt is at Dynasty Peasant.